What's up, guys? My name is Miles.
And my name is Fez.
And this is The Commodity. And today we're reacting to the oldest city in the Philippines, Cebu City history. Now, we did a reaction to the city, a drone-style video.
Right.
So I'm excited to know the history of it.
Yes, and then we do have other cities we're going to be hitting over the next week or so. We got a lot of good suggestions in our comments, so we will be taking a look at them. It's just this one popped up first, so we're taking advantage of the situation and looking at it.
So let's go ahead and hop in and check out the history of Cebu.
And before we do that, if you enjoy our videos, please subscribe. Also, if you enjoyed this video specifically, give us a thumbs up and let's hop in.
Yeah.
This is the Philippines, an archipelago comprising of over 7,500 islands, a fluctuating number mostly dependent on the height of the tide. Almost smack in the middle of this cluster is the island
and
city
who you
Cebu.
ask.
Its 2021 population is estimated to be just short of 1 million people, making it the third most populous city in the Philippines. Historically, it also happens to be the first settlement established by the Spanish, and as a result, it is the oldest city in the country, which also means that it is considered by many to be the birthplace of Christianity in our east. Unsurprisingly, this arrival of Spanish settlers also created conflict, and was right here on Maktan Island, just beside where the modern city of Cebu lies, that arguably the most triumphant moment of early Filipino history occurred, creating the legend known as Lapu-Lapu. So let's talk about it. What were the pivotal moments of this region's recorded history? How was it affected by the arrival of the Spanish Empire? And how has Cebu...
It's crazy how close to sea level everything is right there.
Yeah, like this looks like it's actually going underwater.
Yeah. And like, just look at the separation on that side from, I mean, it all looks like the edges.
It's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Like, this looks like a boat
ramp
right here. But yeah, no, it does look like
it's kind of freaky.
Yeah, it kind of looks like if it rained, it literally floods everything.
Yeah.
Is what it looks like.
That's scary.
Cebu evolved to become one of the most important economic centers in the Philippines. In truth, history of the earliest tribes living in the Philippines isn't that well known prior to the arrival of the Spanish, simply because little was written down. What we do know largely comes from other Asian cultures who were their trade partners and settled there themselves, starting with the period of South Indian Pallava dynasty and the North Indian Gupta Empire, when Indian culture spread to Southeast Asia and reached as far as the Philippines, leading to the establishment of Indianized kingdoms. The date inscribed in the oldest Philippine document found is from 900 AD. Terms and titles seen on this document show that the culture and society of Manila Bay was that of a Hindu and Old Malay mix, similar to the cultures of Java, Malaysia, and Sumatra at the time. An Indianized society sprung up in Cebu when a man named Sri Lumay established his own rajahnate. He had been sent from Sumatra, Indonesia, to establish a base and subdue the local kingdoms. But he essentially went rogue and started his own society. It is commonly argued that there was little evidence that the Philippines experienced much violence or competition amongst its tribes prior to the 14th century. This is in order to create a narrative aimed at the evils of early colonialism. It is more likely that participation in warfare was the most public and prestigious act in this prehistoric society, giving males the possibility of improving their social status. Like everywhere else, participation in warfare was desirable because of potential rewards, slaves, materials, bounty, and especially validation and prestige. By the 1300s, a number of large coastal settlements had emerged as trading centers and became the focal points of societal changes. This phase of history can be noted for its highly mobile nature, with barangays transforming from being settlements and turning into fleets, and participating in land and sea raids was an essential part of the duties.
I really like learning about histories of our country, different countries, because these are things that your day-to-day life you never think about.
No.
Like when you're standing somewhere, you never think like how it got to where it was.
Right.
And it's awesome to, sit back and take a breath and learn about, where you're from and what actually went on in the past.
Yeah, and the challenges. It wasn't just like, hey, this is going to be ours. We're going to just, make this great.
Or can we have this?
Yeah, it's all hardship and death, and not necessarily war, but like even like in the U.S. where when the they started moving west. People were just dying just because it was a hard trek to make.
Yeah.
It took months to get across the nation back then. So.
It's insane.
Yeah.
These raids, locally known as Pangangayao, were usually regular annual expeditions undertaken by whole communities in the very Viking-like fashion. Massive changes to the region began with European arrival. While a settlement has existed on the island for many thousands of years, the city now known as Cebu was officially founded in 1565 by Miguel Lopez de Legazpi with the arrival of Spanish settlers. And the first recorded visit by Europeans came in the form of Ferdinand Magellan's expedition, which landed in Homonhon Island on March 17, 1521. This was followed by Magellan's insane voyage all the way from western Spain to southern tip of South America, all the way to the Philippines. Their goal of the
it
was
is.
a shorter trade route to link Europe to Asia. So not long after
Could
arriving
you
in the
imagine
Philippines,
how long
Magellan
that would
was
take
welcomed.
on a sailboat?
Yeah. On a old ass sailboat. Not even
know.
like a...
No, I know. That's what I'm saying.
like, I mean, nothing. Like, we're talking about, like, you had to ride the tides and you had... Or the flow of water.
I mean, you didn't have an engine.
Wind, yeah.
By the king of Cebu,
Quite possibly
Raja Humapol,
slave.
along with his
Yeah.
wife and around 700 of their native
Rowing,
islanders.
yeah.
They did not lose any time and started baptizing the local population quickly after they
Pushing
gained favor from the
Christianity.
king, who, according to a story, had an ill grandson. Magellan or one of his men was able to cure or help the young boy. While it is likely that knowledge of Christianity had spread deep into the Far East, this was certainly the first time in history of the Philippines that large numbers of natives were evangelized into the church, meaning that Cebu really could have been one of the earliest bastions of Christianity in East Asia, especially since it was
That's
able
cool.
to spread freely without much
The history of it.
persecution. Unlike in Japan, where it was outright forbidden, and it didn't really have much competition from the local beliefs,
That's
like
beautiful.
in Mindanao, where
Yeah.
Islam was much more established. But back to Magellan. So on that same expedition, Magellan and his crew tried to land on Maktan Island, some 6 kilometers east of Cebu. They were not given the same acceptance there, especially from Lapu-Lapu, the local chieftain. When mention is made of the Spanish conquest of the Philippines, the first event that inevitably comes to mind is the Battle of Maktan. Every Filipino schoolchild would know of this story and be taught about it. It has been etched into Filipino nationalist consciousness, and Lapu-Lapu is considered a national hero. Instead of a warm welcome, the Spaniards were met with a barrage of flying spears, and subsequently the Battle of Maktan was fought on April 27, 1521. Magellan was heavily outnumbered with only 100 soldiers or less, fighting Lapu-Lapu head-on in typical European fashion, utilizing his advanced weaponry. Considering that under Lapu-Lapu's commands there may have been well over 1,000 warriors, this probably
love the
at first
acting.
seems like an obvious foolhardy blunder. In reality, Magellan by this point in his career was an experienced military leader who had faced similar odds when fighting various tribes in South America, including
Goodness.
the Aztecs. Technological and tactically advanced methods of European fighting usually prevailed as they scared off local resistance, especially due to European tradition of warfare, which emphasized very direct confrontation that usually resulted in many casualties.
I wanna watch this
time they
movie.
did not, and Magellan and most of his soldiers were overwhelmed and killed. Magellan's body was never recovered, and the remaining members of his expedition returned to Spain. Ever since, Lapu-Lapu became a national hero, symbolizing the nation's bravery and capability of resisting foreign invaders. Today, there are 2 monuments standing close to each other on Maktan Island, one in the name of the first national Philippine
That's cool.
hero, and
Yeah,
one
that's
for
awesome.
Magellan, the first bringer of Christianity.
I'd love to visit
So the
that.
story of Spanish
It's a tad bit
colonization
ironic that
continues,
they have
as
both.
on April
Yeah.
27, 1565, another set of Spanish conquistadors, led by Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, arrived in Cebu. Raja Tupas was the chieftain of Cebu at the time, and he was not as easily swayed as the previous one. He was defeated, and as a result, he became the last Raja of Cebu, drawing to an end the history of Indianized society. Tupas and Legazpi signed the Treaty of Cebu, which effectively gave Spain control over it. The Spaniards then constructed fortified settlements, with the main one being called Villa del Santísimo Nombre de Jes, and also
That's a
Fort San
mouthful.
Pedro, a military fortification in East Cebu City, to defend the Spanish settlement from attacks by natives opposed to the colonization. Agriculture, trade, and commerce flourished in Cebu as it grew and its population increased over the
The way that's
centuries as
colored, it looked
Spaniards
like the
continued
water was
their
going going through the entire city.
Philippines.
Yeah.
The fragmented and sparsely populated nature of the islands made it easy for Spanish colonizations. The Spanish brought political unification through conquest of the various small maritime states. One of Spain's main objectives was the conversion of the local population to Roman Catholicism. The work of conversion was not that difficult, mostly thanks to the disunity of the religions that were existing, with the exception of Islam.
That was Castilian Spanish that they were using right there. Like, this is actually how you spell my father's name.
Mm-hmm.
And Castilian Spanish, it's actually Javier.
Yeah.
So, like, now it's spelled with a J.
Mm-hmm.
But in Spain, anywhere else in Latin America, it's Javier with a J. But in Castilian or Castellano Spanish, it's with an X.
See, I would have thought that said Xavier.
Yeah, but in Spanish, it's Javier.
Yeah.
Because my dad also has a thing that they had done while they were in Spain. It's got my dad's name, and it's got my mom's name, and it has Elizondo on the top, and it spelled with an X.
Yeah.
So, I mean, most people that are from Spain have their name spelled like this. That's Javier.
Yeah.
Of the local population to Roman Catholicism. The work of conversion was not that difficult, mostly thanks to the disunity of the religions that were existing, with the exception of Islam, which was still predominant in the southwest. Over the centuries, Spain never made any profit from ownership of the Philippines. In fact, it was a massive burden, made worse by wars.
I like
and
seeing
famine,
old
but
coins
it could
like
not
that too.
withdraw
Yeah,
because
it's really
of the
cool.
perceived obligation to spread Christianity in East Asia.
What they were able to do in the time.
Initially, slavery
it was
was
impressive.
widespread in the Philippines, either between tribes or with early Spanish settlers as well. But this was mostly the case only before the archipelago was integrated into the Spanish Empire, because the Spanish actually established anti-slavery laws in Americas, and they also extended them to the Philippines. This did not, however, eliminate slavery completely, especially since no laws were made to prohibit slave ownership amongst Filipinos themselves, but it did reduce it considerably. Overall, Cebu prospered, and new communities began to develop, and the economy grew.
how the
Spanish
water's just
colonialism in the
flowing.
Philippines wasn't actually that bad for the locals, whose standard of living was most definitely improved over the next 3 centuries. The governmental and administrative agencies introduced by Spain had considerable effect in welding the Filipinos into one entity. Numerous barangays, constantly at war with each other, became part of one single united colony. This led up to the Philippine Revolution. During the 19th century, an educated Filipino middle class emerged, and it had a desire for Philippine independence. Opposition before 1872 was primarily confined to the Filipino clergy, who resented the Spanish monopoly of
That's
power
dope.
within the Roman Catholic Church. The real cause of the Philippine revolt was the political
And,
maturation and national awakening of its people, and of course propaganda portraying Spain as a massively abusive empire. So in 1896, the war for independence against Spanish occupation began. When the Spanish authorities discovered Katipunan, led by Andres Bonifacio, who openly declared a nationwide armed revolution. And on April 3rd, 1898, the Cebuano revolutionary
really wanna
soldiers
watch that
evicted
movie.
the Spanish forces from the
The reason we looked at each other is KKK represents something vastly different here. So.
Yeah.
city in the Battle of Tres de Abril, as the local revolutionaries rose up against the Spanish colonial authorities and took control of the urban
These
center
videos
after
that
3
he's
days of
showing,
fighting. Leon Quilates
is
was
this a
betrayed and
movie?
killed by one of his
And
own men,
if
the
so,
rebels ended up
is it all
withdrawing
one
a few
movie
weeks later. By June,
that
the
just
island of
shows
Luzon,
the
with the
history?
exception
Yeah.
of Manila, was under Filipino control. The first Filipino flag was again unfurled, and the national anthem was played for the first time alongside the establishment of the first Philippine Republic and
That's
its
dope.
revolutionary government. This success wasn't just attributable to the work of Filipino revolutionaries, however, as at the time Spain was also at war with Americans, who managed a major victory in the Battle of Manila, during which they blockaded and captured the capital. The Philippines would not have its real independence yet, however, as on February 4th, 1899, hostilities between Filipino and American forces began, when an American sentry patrolling between Filipino and American lines shot a Filipino soldier. The Filipino forces returned fire and ignited the Second Battle of Manila. The Philippines declared war against the United States on June 2nd, 1899,
I didn't
with
know that.
Pedro
Did
Paterno,
not either.
president of the Congress of the First Philippine Republic, issuing a proclamation of war. So from 1899 to 1902, the war between Filipino revolutionaries and the United States occurred, resulting in the American colonization of the entire country. Americans who were in favor of annexation had a variety of motivations. Desire for commercial opportunities in Asia, concerned that the Filipinos were incapable of self-rule, and feared that if the United States did not take control of the islands, another power, such as Germany or Japan, might do so instead. And so with the signing of the Treaty of Paris at the end of the Spanish-American War provided for the secession of Cebu along with the rest of the Philippines to the United States. Cebu grew and expanded throughout the American colonial era as the Americans improved and established modern public infrastructure, such as highways, bridges, public services, and ports, as well as developing the educational system. In 1936, Cebu, having officially been a town since its inception, became a city. In December 1932, the U.S. Congress started moving towards giving the Philippines independence, leading to the creation and passing of the tiding.
So outside of the war, obviously the war was not good. It's not favorable on either side. But do y'all consider the American colonizing the country a good thing overall or a bad thing? Yeah. It's okay either way. It's your country, not ours. So just let us know down in the comments. I'm kind of curious on how y'all take it. Some of the stuff looks like it was good because of the growth of the city and all that kind of stuff.
The reasoning behind it, I think, was horrible. Was very negative.
Yeah, no, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was basically us calling them stupid.
Right.
Is the way I took it. So I disagree on the reason, but the end game may have been good. Yeah. Like the overall thing.
So do you guys have a positive outlook or a negative outlook on it?
Yeah.
McDuffie Act, otherwise known as the Philippine Independence Act, which allowed the establishment of the Commonwealth of the Philippines with a 10-year period of peaceful transition to full independence. So the new Filipino government embarked on an ambitious nation-building policies in preparation for economic and political independence. Their plans would have to be paused for a while, however. On December 8, 1941, the Japanese launched their invasion by sea from the island of Formosa, otherwise known as Taiwan, and the island of Palau. The defending forces significantly outnumbered the Japanese, but were a mixed force of non-combat and semi-experienced soldiers. While the Japanese used their first-line troops, and by concentrating their forces, they swiftly overran most of Luzon during the first month. Cebu City became an important base for the Japanese during the war, and as a result, it was subject to aerial bombardment by US forces, resulting in widespread damage. Prior to the war, Cebu had been the Philippines' second most important industrial center, and it offered the Allies a harbor for future operations against the Japanese, making it an important strategic target. This led to the Battle of Cebu City. The whole island was garrisoned by a force between 14,500 and 15,000 Japanese troops.
There's so much history that one city has been through.
Following preliminary bombardment, the battle began on March 26, 1945, when the Allies launched Operation Victor II. Under the leadership of Major General William H. Arnold. The force consisted of about 5,000 men who landed on Talisay Beach, 4 miles southwest of Cebu City. Meeting no Japanese opposition, the US forces nevertheless suffered heavily from mines and booby traps as they crossed the beach. The troops slowly forced its way off the beach and moved in.
Why do they call them booby traps?
I'm sure booby means something other than boobies.
I understand that, but like, what
Maybe
does it mean?
Maybe that's why boobies are called boobies, because they're traps.
Against only small pockets of Japanese resistance that were carrying out delaying actions.
That's a good question, though. Like, legitimately.
I mean, I understand that it doesn't have the same meaning, but like, what is the meaning? Like,
I'm sure booby means something like a dangerous situation. Trap means trap.
Okay.
A village 2 miles from Cebu City.
The city itself was not that heavily defended either, as large parts of the Japanese force had withdrawn to hilly and more defensive terrain in the north of the city. During the final stages of the battle, the mountainous parts of Cebu were also bombed and cleared. A series of battles were subsequently fought during this time, the most famous of which was the Battle of Gochan Hill. It took about 2 months to fully liberate Cebu between March and April 1945. Cebu recovered after the war and grew and developed into a major economic center. Cebu's success as a sea hub also contributed to its emergence as an air transportation hub. During the Vietnam War, the US upgraded Maktan Island's airstrip to enable it to handle military jets. When the war ended, Cebu was left with the makings of an international class airport, which has been expanded since then. Cebu became the second most significant metropolitan center in the country after the capital of Manila, recognized as the Philippines' main domestic shipping port and home to about 80% of the country's domestic shipping companies. The city was never rich in any particular resources and isn't endowed with much arable land, so it had to follow a model that was similar to Singapore and Hong Kong, largely relying on trade. As is often the case, independence from any single
It's such a beautiful island.
Fosters
It is.
a
It's
flexible
insane.
economy,
That's a
one
cool
that is
looking
not at
island,
the
too.
mercy
Yeah.
of bad weather or iron ore prices, for example. Of course, trade isn't the only
Whale
reason
shark.
why the city has prospered. Tourism is huge in the Philippines, and Cebu isn't an exception here. Being strategically situated in the heart of the Philippines, Cebu is very close to the country's biggest tourist spots. It attracts about 2 million tourists every year because of its location, economy, rich culture, pristine beaches, and the availability of diverse food. Cebu's business leaders are optimistic about the city's growth,
wanna swim with
tourism
whale
industry
sharks.
leading the
I
way,
think that would
along
be
with
cool.
development in IT and real estate sectors, with many multi-billion-dollar projects to come. So in a sense, Cebu is a city with an excellent model for growth that other cities in the Philippines should and could follow. So there you go, the story of Cebu, and a quick overview of the Philippines. I learned a lot doing this video, and I don't know why I kept putting it off. I didn't expect to find such a deep well of interesting history that I haven't looked into. Check out this Golden Street light map of Cebu
That's
that you can
dope.
get
Yeah,
from
it is.
geoperspective.org. You can download and print yourself or use it as a wallpaper. Now guess the location of this footage by leaving a sacrifice.
Yeah, that's a dope image. Thank you, Geo Perspective, for doing the research and making this video. This was awesome. There is so much history that goes into the city. Again, that nobody thinks about. Nobody.
We don't think about.
What? Okay, so the way I'm saying it is like our state, for instance, has so much history
Right.
that most people don't think about, and that's crazy.
I would almost argue that in just Texas.
Yeah,
Because there's just something about a Texan's mentality of knowing their
right.
history compared to other states. Like in Tennessee, we had to learn Tennessee history in 4th grade, but after that, the only thing that we know about is we came over during the Alamo.
Yeah,
Where Tennessee is called the volunteer state, because during the Battle of the Alamo, we were the largest population that joined Texas to fight the Mexicans, and that's where volunteer came from.
yeah,
But beyond that, nobody truly knows much about the state outside of 4th grade, when we had the entire year in science or history was to learn about the state.
right.
After that,
No more.
there's not much more. I mean, you learn because there's so much history in that area because of the Civil War and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, just like where you're from.
Right.
But here in Texas, there's something about knowing and being prideful beyond the country, the U.S., that, Texans are like, we could be our own country, blah,
Yeah.
blah, which is complete BS. You can't secede. It's against the Constitution of each state and the country itself. But generally speaking, as an American, yeah, we don't know much about our history. Like, I went up to people, it's been a while, but I would ask, when was the Declaration of Independence signed? They couldn't give me a date.
Yeah.
They couldn't give me a year. They told, technically, a lot of people were like July 4th, which technically isn't true. It's July 2nd. But I would have accepted July 4th if they could have given me the year.
Yeah.
Do you know what year?
No.
See? 1776. Seems very basic to me,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't know.
Guys, if you have any other cities that you want us to react to, let us know in the comments below, or in the description there's a link to our Discord if you want to hop in there as well. Also, if you live in Cebu, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, we did get quite a few people that were like, hey, this is my hometown.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love seeing that. I love being able to hear. Like, I've even said, like, we point out like a building. They're like, right next to that's where I live. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's really cool. So yeah, let us know any other cities like this. Like I said, we did get a lot of suggestions, so we're going to go through multiple cities and get to know the area a little bit better. So with that being said,
my name is Miles.
And my name is Fez.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Peace
out.